Hello, hello, hello. Happy Friday. Welcome into Boilermaker Lounge. I am Sam Springer, as always, joined by the All American Grant Flora. Grant, it is Friday, and that's all I got to say about that.
Yeah. No, it's been a long week. I tell you what, just on my end, lots of stuff going on. It's just been one of those weeks. I feel like a lot of people that I know are saying that. I don't know if it's just on our college campus or if it's just one of those weeks during the year where a lot of stuff happens, but I feel like been going pretty much nonstop for, since the beginning of the week. But it's
Well,
been, yeah.
you and I were talking off air before we came on, and my kids were home for the first 3 days of the week because of the cold and the snow and everything. And I work from home for my day job, so it kind of, throws a wrench in my goings on because like I told you, when they are home, they think dad is home as well, and that's not the case. Dad still works even when it's really, really cold. So, yes, it's been a long week so far.
Yeah.
But that was added, more of the longness was added to my week. After Tuesday, the Boilermakers fall for their third straight in Big Ten play, 72-67 in Bloomington to the rival Indiana Hoosiers. Grant, um, this one was difficult to watch.
Yeah, I just feel like the last couple games we've been able to find some specific things, specific issues, also just reasons the other teams were able to kind of make things happen. Illinois with Wagler and just the length and the rebounding, and then UCLA with Dent and Bilodeau. Like there were just some things. This one, it just felt like Purdue just didn't show up, not the way they were supposed to. I can tell you that.
Right.
And we can get into the specifics of it as well, but this one felt more of a collective team. Just they were not themselves, and I get it to a certain slight extent. Like you're on the road against a rival, and just crazy stuff happens in those games, and you can kind of lose your composure a little bit. But it shouldn't happen to a senior laden experienced team like Purdue, especially when you gotta have a win. So that was
Right.
really disappointing.
Right, and you kind of nailed it there for me as well, because this was a situation. Yes, it's a difficult game because of the rivalry. It's a difficult game because it's a rivalry on the road, but at the same time, you have to have it. And when you are the most experienced and winningest class that Matt Painter has had, it's definitely one that you did not expect such a lackluster uh, start, kind of middle, because they did get a little bit going at the right out of the half, but this was a game that I just didn't feel that they ever got any sort of momentum going, and when they did, they would do something that would shoot themselves in the foot, and they would do IU did little. There was a stretch in that second half, Grant, after they're down 11 at the half, looked really poor at it, in going into the half, let IU finish strong and build that 11-point lead, and it's just like, man, there are so many things that should be going better. Purdue got to a point where they cut it to 8. IU went something like, I want to say, 5 or 6 minutes without hitting a shot, but they kept the lead at 6, 7, 8 points simply because Purdue kept fouling and allowing them to get points and then they wouldn't hit a shot. So Purdue went on a small, it just seemed like whenever they started getting something going, they would do something that would shoot themselves in the foot. And this is the first time, Grant, this year that I've said that it wasn't the other team doing something.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. Overall, I think the start of the game was a little bit more like just weathering the storm. Like,
Uh-huh.
Indiana's gonna come out on fire at home in a big rivalry game, especially when we talked about the same thing with UCLA and USC. Like, this is a fringe bubble type team that doesn't have a terrible record when you look at who they played. Like their losses for the most part aren't bad. They've competed with some good teams, but they didn't have the signature win. So for Indiana, it's just a huge game, and you could see that in the start. Then Purdue started figuring things out. Like I thought they played some decent basketball, had some good actions and stuff to kind of weather that storm, and they got up to the point where they were up 23-19, I think, at one point. Like, they had a decent lead, and they looked like they were starting to play the game that we kind of thought they were going to play, where maybe they didn't run away with it, but they were going to have control and have the lead and end up by the end of it getting a 5 to 10 point win out of it. It's kind of what I started to see. And then credit to Indiana, they had some stretches in this game where it felt like they couldn't miss, and they played good offense. Even guys like Connor Enright, who had a great game, even though he only had 8 points. Like just a lot of the stuff he was doing. Nick Dorn was on fire, and like he's riding the heater these last few games for Indiana. But to show up in that capacity, I know he's 4 for 9. Like it's not the craziest percentage in the world, but still, he made some big ones. But the thing was, it was very inconsistent. Like there were moments where Indiana was ice cold, and Purdue couldn't take advantage. Purdue had 67 points in this game. That's pretty low. Like they've been scoring a lot more than that. So that was obviously a huge disappointment. By the time you ended the first half, started the second half, the lead balloons to like 16 or something at one point. It's just because Indiana was out hustling them. They were, just making the types of plays that Purdue just wasn't making.
9:54 left in the game. It was 59-45. IU, so 14 points, the biggest lead. But to talk about the first half, Purdue was up, like you mentioned. They were up 23-19. And at that point, I made an observation and posted about the fact that Purdue was out rebounding IU at the time, 11-6. So they were hitting the boards. They had a good lead, and this was, I believe, the under 12 timeout or the under 8 timeout. It might have been the under 12 when they had that lead at 23-19. But IU then proceeded to go on a 21-6 run, including a 14-0 run, 13-0 run to basically just demolish what Purdue was wanting to do. Purdue turned the ball over 7 times in that first half. They were 4 of 7, and we'll get to the free throw thing. Because I believe that, as poorly as Purdue played, they shoot just slightly better at the free throw line. We're not talking about a loss. I really don't think that I do think that. And I know there was a comment made against when we recapped Illinois' game, or the Illinois game. Somebody made a comment of, well, if all of Illinois threes were twos, Purdue would have won. We're playing. I understand that they weren't, but the free throw line, there's nobody. It doesn't change anything other than Purdue's score. You know what I mean? But this first half was. I mean, nobody really blew the doors off of any sort. I mean, 29 points. That's such a poor outing in that first half. They were 4 of 7 from the free throw line. They were 3 of 10 from threes. They just didn't do what they had been doing almost every other game for the most part. There have been a couple of times that they hadn't, but just being able to do whatever they wanted offensively, and they couldn't do a lick of what they wanted to do offensively. And part of it was IU playing decent defense, but part of it was just Purdue didn't look like they had a fire in them. They just looked lifeless sometimes.
Yeah, you saw that with some of the turnovers. They should have been able to do so much more in the paint than what they did. They really should have. Just with like Indiana didn't really have a guy that could disrupt Jacobson like some of the other teams that we've seen. Like on paper previewing the game. Like there was no big monster center in there that could just physically cause problems for Daniel Jacobson. Like he
Right.
should have had a decent game, I think. And he ends up with like 3 points. He had 5 rebounds. Like I think all things considered, that shows that he was active there. But 3 points, like he could have had a lot more. And obviously Clough and TKR. Now TKR, this is a positive note, had a much better game. Like
Oh, for
23
sure. Yeah.
points, 9 of 14 from the field. We will take that. 3 assists as well. But he didn't rebound the ball as well as normal. But, from a scoring and offensive standpoint, like that was really good to see. But he killed him at the free throw line. 5 of 10, and he missed at least one front end. And
Yeah.
like the overall, this Purdue front court didn't quite dominate the way that I expected, or at least thought that they could. And then I think you can talk about Braden and Fletch too, and even some of the bench guys like Jakari and Omer. Like nobody in the backcourt was just able to kind of win their matchups the way that they really should have.
Yeah. This is. We go to the full game, that second half, and I kind of noticed it, didn't make mention of it too much. I mean, I kind of I believe I did. Right around the same time Robbie Hummel said, Purdue's starting to get to this two-man game and it's working. I honestly think for the most part this needs to be kind of what Purdue gets to. I noticed that I don't remember who was saying, it might have been Boilers in the Stands. We're talking about it post game that Purdue's got so much firepower. They do. They have shooters all over the place that it almost gets to the point where they're thinking, yeah, I've got the open shot, but so and so is wide open too. And they keep passing it, and they pass up on good-looking shots or on things that they could be doing because they have so many weapons. Look, they weren't the preseason number 1 ranked team or a top 10 ranked team for most of this season because of all the other firepower. It's because TKR and Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer are their seniors, and they're their leaders. They're their scorers. Yes, I know Fletcher has been struggling. Yes, I know TKR had been struggling in the past couple of games as well. But look what happened when they went strictly to that two-man game, and then they started whittling into the lead. It made it a lot closer. And TKR showed why he was an All-American honorable mention and a first-team All-Big Ten player last year, because he can average, or he can put 23 on the board, including 16 in the second half. And I think I agree with that it was almost like they wanted to share so much. Everybody wanted to just keep sharing. Let's get everybody hot. You know what? We don't need everybody hot. We need Braden Smith, we need TKR, we need Fletcher, and one other one to be hot, and then others to make some shots. We don't need everybody to be hot.
Yeah, I think I think you could say that that's happened even more than just this past game as well. I think you probably noticed it more in this game.
I think we noticed it more this game because we absolutely needed it.
Yeah.
This game.
Yeah, and other stuff just wasn't flowing the right way. So, yeah, I think there's a fine line of like passing up a good shot for a better shot, but also like you just got to get in the rhythm and the flow. And they just weren't like, sometimes you pass it too much, and then a guy takes a fake and gets somewhere where they get to a decent shot, but it just wouldn't have been as good as the one you passed up.
Right.
And so sometimes the idea of like, oh, there's a chance that we get a better shot here, it's not worth the risk of giving up the good shot. It's like, you got the good shot there. Let's not mess around thinking we get something better. Let's just get a CJ Cox, in rhythm 3 from the outside instead of a Fletcher. Fletcher's open on the other side of the court, and maybe a guy closes out better than they thought, and he gets the fake, and then they're rotating.
Or they tip the ball because you tried to cross court it.
Like, it just endless things that can cascade into the point where you don't end up with a good shot. So, yeah, I see what you're saying there. And there were just other times I thought, especially in the second half, where like Purdue just didn't run good offense. Like there were some
Right.
stagnant stuff going on that you don't normally see from them. Guys, the shot selection wasn't great. Um, guys trying to probably do a little more than they should to get back in the game. So, and then obviously, I think you could say this about Purdue's last three games in general. Like in the last 2 minutes, they've been awful. I don't know what
Yeah.
the, I don't know what the, if you went back to the last 2 minutes of each of those three games, what the total score is, but they've got to be getting killed. And like it'd be a combined 6 minute stretch, right? Take the last 2 minutes of each of
It
those three
was
games.
8-0 in the UCLA game. I want to say it was at least 12-5 in the last couple of minutes in the Illinois game, and I don't know what it was in this one, but IU won that one as
Yeah.
well.
Well, because Purdue had it 65-63.
Yeah.
And then it was, so that's at least 7-4. But
Right.
like when Purdue, I tell you what, there was probably 8 minutes to go in the game. Purdue was starting to come back, but they were still down by, 10 or so points. And I could just see the writing on the wall. It's like they're going to get close, but they're just not going to get over the hump. And Indiana's going to pull out a type of win, like exactly what happened. And it's
Mhm.
because they they they're just not like they're not stepping up in the moments and making those types of plays and making the right decisions. Like some of the shots they're taking is just like TKR, for example. One of those last shots where he put up a shot and then I think he tried to get the rebound and ended up not working out. It may have been when Enright had hit the three to go up 5 and Purdue really needed one. It was like there was just too much contest there. Like it just wasn't a very good shot. Yeah, it could have gone in, but like they were really putting a lot of emphasis on him, and that's a point where you got to give it up, and you got to move the ball around more, get the defense in more rotation. I get there wasn't a lot of time, but like that's where you need a basket. And there were times I thought when Braden and TKR at the end, they were playing the two-man game. Braden kept dishing to TKR the whole time, and the defense knew exactly what was coming. There was no counter. Like just the types of things where their overall execution at the end of games has really been pretty poor.
Yeah, well, it was let's see here. 65-55 with 5 minutes and 23 seconds left after Wilkerson hit a layup. And Purdue hit a 3, came back down, hit another 2, or no, a free throw, I'm sorry. Free throw? Yeah. Must have been one of TKR's missed free throws, and then he made one. No, this is one he actually made them both. Cut it to 5, and TKR got it to 4 with one of 2, and they just Braden Smith got it to 65-63. Then they gave up a 3. Then they went and hit a layup. Like they were keeping it close, but they just weren't able to get over the hump during that time frame. It bad pass turnover, personal foul on top of that. It just and IU did their greatest job or attempt to keep Purdue in this game because they missed 3 straight front ends of a 1-and-1. So they make their free throws. This isn't even we're not talking about a 5-point loss. We're talking about probably a double-digit loss, honestly. But at the same point, on Purdue's side, it just the last 2 minutes of the game. That's what I was going to do. I got to thinking something else. Okay, it was 65-61 with 2 minutes left, and the game finished 72-67. So it was a what, an 8 to or a 7-6 game
So yeah, I've
in
scored by
that
one.
last 2 minutes. So it was relatively close, but it was already 5 points. Like they were already down by 5 points. They weren't up 5 points. They were down by 5 points, and they just couldn't outscore IU anymore. They'd gotten to the point where they'd fought and clawed and scratched and did everything they could poorly at times, but everything they could to get back into the game and make it a 2-point game, that they just couldn't get any closer than that.
Yeah. And
You know?
yeah, and you look at the sequence, like from the point it was 65-63, you look at that sequence to the end of the game, and it's like they give up a 3 to Connor Enright, and I get there was a screener there, but like you just can't lose him in that situation.
Right.
And I get he's not the greatest 3-point shooter. I do. But when you're in a rivalry game and you're playing on the road, like you have to play the game that you're in, not the game, not the 20 games leading up to it. Because guys play differently. It's always been that way. And Connor Enright was playing a good game. Like, he only probably had 5 points at the time because then he hits the 3. But like, anyway, he ended up with 8. But like, he'd done a lot of really good things. He'd made a shot earlier. The broadcasters have been talking about it. Not that the players can hear that, but you can just tell this kid's playing a good game. And so you can't let him have that much space that early in the possession. I mean, it was who was it that brought it up? Whoever was controlling the point for him, it may have been Wilkerson or Dorn. Like they just made one pass to the left wing, Enright's wide open, and he drills a 3.
Yeah, there was nothing. It didn't appear that there were a ton of things done to get him open.
No, like one little flare screen that Purdue could have switched. The guy didn't seem like he was really fighting through the screen that much. Like it didn't feel like the sense of urgency was there when you're down 2 and you've got like a minute to go. So that was obviously bad. Then the next play, I think that was the TKR play where he went up for a contested hook where he's pushed out, and that I thought was not great shot selection. And after that, it all kind of fell apart, obviously. But like, those are the critical sequences where good teams, championship contending teams, make the plays they need to make to win games. Look at Michigan State on the road at Rutgers. They find a way to force OT and then they dominate OT. I get that they should have never been in that position, but they found a way in crunch time to execute and make the plays. And we just haven't seen that from Purdue.
Yeah, and I think you're talking about when it was 65-60, Purdue had the ball. They got a turnover, and TKR had a missed hook shot, and then he went after the ball and got the personal foul.
It was earlier than I thought.
Yeah, it was a little bit earlier. There was almost 3 minutes left at that point, or 2 minutes and 18 seconds is when he got that foul. That was the last time that he had a foul off of a missed shot of his. The rest of the way, it was kind of just mishmash of different things.
I'm remembering something. I don't remember exactly what that play was after the Enright 3, but I'm pretty sure it may have been the Braden Smith pass that went out of bounds. There was something like that where it was just a terrible possession to come back with.
Right after it was like 20 seconds later he threw the ball out of bounds.
Okay,
bad pass out of bounds. Yep. So yeah, and that's kind of what we've been talking about is just like when they had an opportunity after they'd done a few things to get back into it or to show that maybe there is a little bit of life, there is a little bit of momentum coming back, boom, do something to just deflate everything. And these types of games happen, but when you stack it onto the last 2 prior to this, there are concerns. Now, am I bailing on this? Absolutely not, because you know what? And don't give me that's a bad comparison because that team was a completely different team. UConn in 2022-23, when they won as a 4 seed, they lost 5 of 8, including 3 in a row, and they looked horrid. And they came through and started getting hot at the right time and started playing basketball that they had played, the style of basketball they had played earlier in the season to get to be kind of like, oh, hey, here comes UConn. I'm not talking about the Zach Edey senior season when they played in the national championship the year before. and they were a 4 seed. They kind of limped in a little bit because people are like, what's UConn going to look like? And then it just clicked. They started playing a little bit better, gotten beat by Marquette, I think, in the Big East tournament. And then when they got into the tournament, they just started playing what they knew how to play. And they ended up winning the national championship. Is that an exact replica of what this Purdue team is going to be? I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I'm not going to throw away the season on a 3-game losing streak with this talent and with this team that they've shown they can be at times. They can be a great rebounding team. They can be a good defensive team. They're not going to be a great defensive team, but you don't need to be great necessarily if you can score offensively. Now, I've seen that. So I have the confidence that they can do this again. They can turn into this team again.
Yeah, I'm actually glad you brought that up because people talk about the UConn span, like the back-to-back, and they talk about how dominant both of those teams were, and they kind of make it sound like, UConn was this favorite both times. But the first time,
no,
you're exactly right. Like the first half of the season, they were a top 1 or 2 team. I think there was a point where they were number 2 and Purdue was number 1.
I think you're right. Yeah.
And then Purdue obviously drops. I think UConn spent some time in the top spot, but they were right up there. They were dominating. They looked kind of just as unbeatable. And then they hit that streak, and everybody kind of wrote them off. Like nobody really thought of them as a contender. They dropped to the 4 line, and I don't remember well enough to know how well they were playing before the NCAA tournament, like in the Big East and the end of that regular season.
They ended up winning maybe 5 or 6 in a row going into the tournament, into the Big East tournament. I just saw the game by game results not too long ago, and I think it was 5 or 6 going in. They won 1 game and then got beat by Marquette in like the semis.
Yeah, so then they finished pretty strong, and then they caught some fire in the tournament. They had some help, like they didn't have to play the 1 seed in the Sweet 16. I think.
That was an 8-9 or an 8 or 9.
Yeah, I think like Arkansas had upset them or something.
Yeah.
They played like Gonzaga, the 3 seed in the Elite 8, and obviously the Final Four was crazy that year. So like they didn't like go through the buzzsaw at it by any means in the NCAA tournament, but like still they were playing great basketball. They were dominating good teams. And I totally think with the experience, the talent that Purdue has on their roster, they could do something similar to that. And like you said, like we're not saying this going to happen for sure, but like the possibility is there. And if the possibility is there, then obviously that's what you're going to pursue. And that's what this Purdue team is still pursuing. Not to say they're going to be a 4 seed in the tournament. I still think they can elevate that. It just depends on how the rest of this regular season goes.
Well, they're definitely going to have to turn things around. I mean, right. and that is to be expected. But if you think about this, Grant, think about what we just talked about. UConn in 22-23, they lost 3 in a row, then they won 1, then they lost 5 of 8. If you look at what Purdue's schedule looks like coming up, they could legitimately have a lost 5 of 8 in there, built into that, or in those games, and they'd be very similarly set up to probably be a 4 or 5 seed going into the tournament, and as long as they win the games that they should, and maybe win a couple of games that they're not expected to, or is kind of a toss-up, they're going to go into that tournament as a 4, maybe a 3, depending on how they perform in some of these games, and this could be I'm not okay. I have said over and over 40-0, 39-1. I have constantly said that. But my point being on that one is that's me just being silly. Purdue's not going to win the rest of their games. They're going to lose some games in here. They're going to lose games, period. But at the same time, this team is a potential Final Four team. Think about what makes a Final Four team. Okay, you've got scorers. You've got some defense. You've got some leaders, senior leadership. this team has their core that has been to the national championship game. Like they've been there. They know how to get there. They know what it takes. Granted, they had the National Player of the Year, but at the same point, last year they pushed the national runner-up to the last possession of the game, and honestly played a better game in that than Houston. I think in that game, in that second half, definitely they played a better half. They just came up one play short. They've got the makeup that can be a Final Four team. There's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, for sure. I think, when you look at what happened 2 years ago and you're a Purdue fan, I think the expectation is that, like, to win a national championship, it has to look the exact same way it did then, and then you just win one more game.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's kind of the expectation and kind of what's been going on in minds. I thought that there was a great chance that would happen. Purdue would win the Big Ten with like 3 losses. Maybe they wouldn't even win the Big Ten tournament, but they'd head in as a 1 seed and, be able to just kind of cruise through their region, hit the Final Four. And once you're there, you're in Indy and, you're in prime position to get it done. Like, that's just kind of where the mind goes. But like all of this is making the point that it doesn't, when you get to March, there's no script. There's no there's no path that just is going to carry you on easy street straight to the Final Four. Like, anything happens. We saw it when Purdue, the Carson Edwards team, nobody thought Purdue was going to the Final Four that year. And yet they were
an eyelash
away. Right.
They were a tenth of a second away.
Right. Like, literally. So you just, it's obviously not what we hoped for at this point in the season and in this particular stretch, but this team still has everything to play for. And you talk about the upcoming schedule. They've got 2 games where they should have a chance to try and right the ship, even though the next one's going to be an away game. Both Maryland and Oregon have had their struggles, and Purdue is too desperate for a win to not let those to not get those 2 games because they need them. Mm-hmm. Then you hit a 6-game streak where you could win. I mean, you could honestly win all of them or none of them. I don't think they'll lose all of them. I don't think they'll win all of them. But anything can happen those next 6 games, and that's what's going to make or break, their position heading in and what we can expect.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that next one you just were mentioning there. They travel to College Park on Sunday, 1 p.m. on CBS. Purdue goes to Maryland to take on the Terrapins. 8-12, 1-8 in the Big Ten. Definitely not the not your, well, what do they say? Not your grandfather's Terrapins. Not the Terrapins that you're used to. Not even the Terrapins of last year. When it comes to what was it, the Crab Five or whatever they were called. A team that a darn good basketball team last year. Completely different this season, with some struggles and things. Grant, this would be a good win for Purdue. I think it's a must win because you don't want to. You obviously can't lose to a 1-8 team, Big Ten team. But at the same time, a must win in the fact of let's get some things right. I know we said that in the preview for IU. This could be a get right game. Well, it didn't quite yet. And this one is a must game because it's a get right game, and also you can't lose to the worst team in the Big Ten.
Yeah, well, you look at Maryland. Their leading scorer for the first 10 games was Pharrell Payne, and then he got injured, I believe, in that Michigan game, and hasn't played since. And that's a huge blow for Maryland because they are thin on the front court.
Right.
I believe their starting lineup, their 2 biggest guys, Solomon Washington and Elijah Saunders, who was recruited in the transfer portal pretty heavily by Purdue and ended up going to Maryland. But Washington, I think both of those guys are 6'7", and Saunders is 6'8", but he's that stretch 4 kind of guy. and Washington looks more of like a traditional forward. Shoots like 23% from three. Um, and the story from Maryland overall is they don't shoot threes very well. Like 32%. Most of their heavy hitters are low percentage. Coit's about the only one that you probably are going to have to really watch out for from three. Now, obviously, we know anything can happen, but um, it just what I'm trying to say is the makeup of this team
Right.
doesn't seem as threatening to Purdue. Now, we said the same thing about IU, but Purdue should, by all means, dominate the front court and shouldn't get burned from three as badly as they have in recent games.
Quick question: as we're talking, you say they should dominate the front court. Is there some going on? And I'm not saying personally. What are you seeing anything that's different with the way Clough and TKR play in the post together anymore? Or like at the beginning when they started, it took a couple of games, but there's a reason why I always said, did TKR and Clough out rebound or come close to out rebounding the entire other team? But now all of a sudden it's one of those that are like, wow, they combined for 9 rebounds. Are you
Yeah,
seeing anything?
I mean, I'm obviously seeing that they're not producing the same way.
Right.
But like, I don't know. I, it almost feels like they're both playing the same like game in the sense where you're only using one or the other, and so
Uh-huh.
it's almost like you've got two guys out there that are combining for a single individual effort, and so it's not as efficient is what I'm saying. Like
Yeah.
you used to see Clough get 12 points, 10 rebounds, and TKR get 18 points and 7 rebounds, and you got two really good productive performances there. Now it's like Purdue sometimes will throw the ball into Clough in the post, and he'll go to work, and DKR kind of just gets out of the way, or vice versa. And it's like you're picking one or the other. And when you pick one or the other, and the same thing on the boards, to be honest, you're going to get, one solid performance that two players combined to get. And so I think they need to go back to, I don't know exactly what it looks like, but go back to look back at that film. What were they doing to be able to play well off of each other, where they can pass to one another? They can, if one guy's the focus of the offense, then the other guy's crashing the boards better. I don't have like an X's and O's answer to that,
Yeah.
but
That's why I asked, because I couldn't see one.
yeah, but like it's just like I think I am somewhat noticing like they're going to both of them offensively, but it's more of a one or the other type situation. And it's just like when you're trying to get Braden Smith involved, and you're trying to get Fletcher Lawyer involved, and then you go to the post on like a rotation type offensive play calling situation, and you go one or the other, it just doesn't give them a lot of opportunities to make as much of an impact. And I wonder if that's affecting the other aspects of their game as well.
Well, and we mentioned with Dustin. I don't know if it was on a post game or if it was here on Boilermaker Lounge, but we kind of mentioned. I believe it was the Oscar Clough game when he went, had 22 points and like 14 rebounds or whatever. He mentioned Dustin mentioned that it was almost seemed like they were starting to think as him as an option for in the rotation of offense. And I'm halfway wondering if that's kind of where it started to go differently. Not necessarily saying it was a bad choice, but kind of okay, well, if we're going to TKR, Oscar, kind of, steps to the side. Whereas before, TKR was kind of the hub down there, and Oscar was cleaning it up. So he was getting his 12 points on maybe getting one entry pass into the post the whole game. But he was getting 12 points and 11 rebounds because he was there to clean it up, clean up shots, and he was and that's what he was getting his points from is getting those get that offensive rebound position, getting it and getting the lay-in. Or instead of actually getting an offensive setup to where he gets the entry pass. I'm not saying that it's and I thought of that as you were talking it through, too, because it does seem like, okay, if TKR's in the post getting it, Oscar's going to the other side and just not getting in a position, and you've seen his numbers go down offense on his rebounding, and you've seen TKR's go down on rebounding as well. I think those are the attributes that I see that are the most beneficial. Not that we couldn't use the points and the scoring, it's those extra plays that we're getting from the rebounds that they had been getting every game up until a certain point, and it's been maybe the last 5 or 6 games that they just have all of a sudden not been rebounding worth a darn.
Yeah, and I think I would like to see TKR get back to being more of the focal point of the offense, because for one, I think it's affecting his game. Like, I think when he knows he's the focal point, you can get into more of a rhythm, and there's just a more, you have more confidence and stuff with your opportunities.
Yep.
Just a different feel. So I think it would help him to do that. But I also think like he just draws a lot more attention, and he's good at facilitating and making the right reads. And so some of the stuff where like, we have the high pick and roll, and Braden would get it to TKR, like top of the key to nail position on the court. And he had the lob to Jacobson/Clough, or you could spray it out either side on the three, depending on what the defense did. And you found yourselves in these like, 4-on-3 type situations. We haven't seen a whole lot of that. Even the normal Braden Smith TKR pick and roll, you saw it more against IU, but I don't recall seeing it as much in the games prior to that. So I think
Wasn't
that
there
works. Yeah, I think it works
much
better to have TKR as a focal point, just because like what's coming, and it's what you've been doing, and it's just like instead of like trying to set up some sort of 3 out 2 in kind of situation where you throw it into Clough on the left block, and it's more ISO basketball. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. We've seen a lot more like Purdue just kind of going one-on-one, guys taking on their man thinking they can beat them, and a lot of times they haven't, and it ends up in a lot more empty possessions.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm not saying that it's good, bad, or indifferent, but there's obviously something going on, and that is preventing, and you know what, it causes a lower output on the scoreboard too. When the last short of the Illinois game. I mean, don't get me wrong, that was but you look at the USC game that they won, they only scored I think 71, I think, in that game. They 68 I think against UC. I could pull it up. Jeez. Come on, Sam. USC they scored 69. UCLA they scored 67. Now they had 82 against Illinois, and probably their in a great offensive output, but then 67 against IU, and prior to that they'd scored 79 against Iowa, but that was a win, and so was the USC game. But that's kind of where it started, I think, because they scored 93 against Penn State, and that was kind of that was the starters, scoring 89. What was it, 89 of the 93 Purdue points? The starters scored that, and but after that, it's just kind of gone downhill to where it doesn't seem like they're producing near as much as what they had. And talking about Clough and TKR and that front court, if they can have a game against Maryland, to where they kind of get back to what got them into this situation, that 9 in a row, that after the Iowa State loss, that one where they just played some dominating basketball in a lot of those games, and it starts in the front court. Purdue's not. Can they make a bunch of threes? Absolutely. But that's not what they are based on. They're based on really great post play that turns into shots at the outside.
Yeah, you look at the 17 games before the West Coast trips. This is everything before the
Right.
USC game. Purdue only scored less than 79 points in one game, and it was the Iowa State game. Everything else, it was 79 and higher. You had two 79-point wins, like where they scored 79. It was Marquette and Iowa. Everything else was above 80. A couple triple-digit games, lots of 90s and mid-80s and stuff. Then you hit the last four games, and it was 64, 67, 82 in a loss, and 67. And I think you can attribute that kind of to what we've been talking about. Just different utilizations, front court, and it's just completely changed the flow and complexion of this offense.
Yeah, and that's I guess the whole fact that we're not talking much about Maryland. It's not that I don't think Maryland's worth previewing. It's more of this game is going to be how Purdue performs, not necessarily how Maryland performs. We kind of, like you said, we can kind of see what we're going to get from Maryland. It's a matter of if Purdue's going to let them exacerbate the situation by playing as shoddy as they have been at times, and especially during the three game losing streak, where they don't defend the 3-point line very well. They don't, in all three of those losses, you can see some big issue at the 3-point line, defending the 3-point line. I mean, it's there. So for Maryland to be 32%, you can't let them shoot 45. You cannot let Maryland shoot 45%. You've got to buckle down on that 3-point line and make sure. Now, don't get me wrong. If there was a guy that's shooting 20% from the 3-point line, and you know what, well, go ahead and let him shoot that, maybe, not wide open, because anybody's going to hit a wide open one, but you give him some pressure. But you don't necessarily need to make sure you're face guarding him at the three. But like, it kills me, because I know these guys are putting in effort. I absolutely know that, and I don't doubt that. And it hurts me to see somebody say, "Well, why aren't these guys trying?" Come on, they're trying. Don't do that. Don't be that type of fan to where when they're winning, it's the top of the world, and when they're losing, they are the problem. You know what? There are tough times, and yes, it sucks to watch. It really does. It gets frustrating to watch. But also remember, they're 17-4. Like, if they lost the rest of their games, they'd still have a winning record. Like that's not going to happen. Purdue's going to turn this around. So the game against Maryland, while I don't say, oh, we don't have to worry about them, it's how are they going to show up and correct some things. That's the biggest thing to me.
Yeah, and it starts with stuff like knowing the scouting report. They didn't do a great job against IU playing the scouting report. Right. And I get that I also made the comment, like, play the game you're in, not the game that, all the 20 games have led you to believe you should be playing. If a guy's playing well and if it's in a rivalry game, like, guard him tough, even if, he doesn't have a great 3-point shooting percentage. Right. But, like, in this type of a game, you've got to know who your good shooters are and who aren't. Like, Elijah Saunders, he's probably the biggest concern for me, just because he shoots 41%, and he's playing pretty solid. He's going to stretch out. He's probably Purdue's going to have their 4 or their 5 guarding him, because Saunders is their tallest player in their lineup, outside of Alex Alston, who's a freshman that plays 10 minutes a game. So I assume that guy won't be as much of an issue. But like Saunders could cause some damage. Obviously, Coit is a 38% 3-point shooter, but he's 5'11". Like he's not going to have a height advantage on Braden Smith. I have a hard time believing Braden doesn't do a good job on him.
Right.
You know, so it's not to say that there aren't guys on this Maryland team that can make threes, but this is one where Purdue's 3-point defense should be able to figure some things out. Because, like we said, we saw that against IU. And it's just, there are times, like when you're making a closeout, you can either close out short and kind of protect the drive. Like you'll give them a slightly contested in rhythm three to avoid them driving around you, or you close out hard and you risk either a pump fake where they can drive, or they just are able to get around you and attack the closeout, is what they call it.
Right.
I think knowing the scouting report is the difference between a hard closeout where I would rather them attack this closeout and go after something at the rim than give them a good rhythm three because I know there's a good chance they can make it, versus let's shade or err on the side of protecting the paint and we'll give them a better in rhythm three as long as and still get a hand up, but we'll take our chances with that.
Mm-hmm.
They did a terrible job at knowing when to close out soft and when to close out hard against IU. And so I want to see that change with some of these, up and down 3-point shooters that Maryland has.
Well, I know Coach Painter was not very happy after the IU game, so I am going to assume that the past couple of days have not been the most wonderful to be at practice. Not in a bad way, but most wonderful meaning there aren't going to be plays taken off
right
during those practices, and definitely I anticipate seeing Purdue come out on Sunday ready to play. Whether they blow the doors off of Maryland right away or if they end up kind of just salting it away and extending the lead and getting it bigger, that's it. I just think that, like you said, this is a better Purdue basketball team than Maryland, and definitely something that they've got to really get back to basics at some things, but get back to what won you ball games prior to this, this streak. Force your will on them, on the team you're playing, rather than letting them dictate what you need to do. And that's kind of what I've seen Purdue do now in these 3 games is, basically from the time they had an 11 or 12 point lead against UCLA on, they've kind of been dictated as to how they're going to play rather than how Purdue's making the other team play. There hasn't been much control on the Boilermakers side.
Yeah, and that's something you should, especially as a high level team, that's something you always need to be aware of. Is just like imposing your will, asserting your pace, and your just what your game plan essentially. Like
Yep.
You have to be in control, and being the team that's kind of making the game what it is and controlling those types of aspects. And you're absolutely right, that has not been the case. Even some of the games that they won recently, like that wasn't really the case.
Right. Well, yeah, the Iowa game definitely.
Yeah.
They won the ball game, but it was not controlled for the whole time by the Boilermakers. They had to fight back into it and then have a whale of the last 10 minutes of that second half in order to win that game the way they did. But Sunday, February 1st. Wow, we're already to February. 1:00 Eastern, CBS, Purdue at Maryland. Grant, this was a long one, but it was a tough one to kind of get into because I don't want people to think that it was me being critical or us always our job is to analyze what we see, and there are things that need fixing, but I don't think it's time to throw in the towel by any means. You're wasting. It's just not time to throw in the towel.
Period. Right. Yeah. got to keep looking forward to the next game and learn from your past games for sure. Like
Yep.
fix those things, but like you can't, settle into this pattern. You got to break out of it, and that's what this weekend is for.
And if you think the sky is falling as a fan, just remember we're 17-4. 36-4 is going to be one heck of a good record by the end of it. So, no. Anyways, that brings us to the end of this episode of Boilermaker Lounge. For the All-American Grant Flora, I'm Sam Sprunger. We'll see you on Tuesday.